I'd be going and playing with the best players in the world. And then I'd go and teach it to K through 12, boys and girls, which just really, really helped me to embody and understand those skills on a deeper level.
Welcome to the Flow State Yoga for Athletes podcast. I'm your host, Dan Rosenak, lifelong student athlete, here to share with you interesting discussions featuring athletes and coaches exploring health and human performance, yoga, and flow state awareness. I hope this show helps us all access our highest potential. Thank you and enjoy the journey. Okay, welcome Martin Bose to the Flow State Yoga Therapy podcast. Martin and I connected through a mutual friend several weeks ago, Kyle Devitt, with the New England Lacrosse Journal, a fellow Clark University alum, and we hit it off immediately. We chatted about lacrosse and life and flow state, and we wanted to record that conversation for you all today. So, welcome to the show. Thank you. And for our listeners, could you tell us who you are and what do you do?
Sure. Thank you, Dan, for having me. And thanks to Kyle for reaching out to connect us in the first place. But yeah, so my name's Martin Bose. I'm a lacrosse coach. I'm also a breathing coach, former professional lacrosse player, father, husband. I live in the Boston area. So yeah, I'm an entrepreneur. So I've got a couple different, um, I'm juggling chainsaws a little bit as the solo entrepreneur typically does, and I'm having a lot of fun with it. I'm learning a lot, and I get to meet really cool people like yourself. So I'm grateful to be doing things that I'm passionate about, and I'm excited to continue to learn and work hard and grow as a person.
That's awesome. Can you tell us how your athletic journey began? And how did you move from youth sports to college lacrosse to the pros playing in the MLL?
Yeah, sure. I, for whatever reason, had this innate desire to play professional sports. When I was in middle school, I thought it was basketball. That was the first love of my life was playing hoops, and absolutely could not get enough. Was always practicing and would just get so excited about stealing the ball and laying it up on the other side. But um, around seventh grade, I started to transition that love from basketball to lacrosse. I was introduced to it in the sixth grade, so a little bit later than a lot of the kids nowadays. Um, and really, it was just like a neighbor suggested it type of thing. Hey, you should try this sport. So within about 2 years, really, really saw it as my new number one sport and started taking it very, very, not even seriously, but just practicing a lot, just spending a lot of time with it. Um, and I grew up in Quincy, so not a big lacrosse town by any means. So as I started to develop as a player, it was very clear that there were other communities, even in the greater Boston area that were much better than us. And so I was a big fish in a small pond. And I think that, comes with pros and cons, but ended up really working out in my favor because by the time I was a junior and senior, I was really relied on to score, a lot of points per game to help us win. Um, and I think that just did numbers for really my confidence. It didn't necessarily get me the looks to college level, but it just allowed me to believe in myself at that time and really think that I could play at the next level. And so, yeah, interestingly, I walked on at the University of Hartford. So I did not get recruited, reached out to the coach and just said, hey, I'm coming there. I'd like to get a tryout. I've been playing really well. I think I could help your team. And he was like, sure. Yeah, this is Peter Lawrence. He didn't know who I was at the time. And I was scrawny, man. I was like 165, like same height I am now, 6'2". So I did not look assuming. But yeah, I worked really hard, man. And I was able to get some playing time my freshman year in college in important games, which was cool. And then by my sophomore year, started getting like second line midi reps. Junior and senior year, I was the top midfielder. And so I think it was the winter of 2011. We had just won the American East Championship, and I got a call from the Cannons GM, who actually I work with now, which is pretty cool. His name's Kevin Barney, and they said they were interested in drafting me. Would I be interested in playing? And I said, hell yeah. And so, yeah, I got drafted and I thought it was so cool. And they picked me up. I was actually the last player in the draft, Mr. Irrelevant. Um, but as you could imagine, I was very humbled when I got to practice with the Boston Cannons, and um, didn't even sniff the field for probably at least about a year. So it took me a full year to really, really work my way up and um, start thinking about cracking the lineup. And yeah, just a nice progression of not getting playing time to getting playing time to getting consistent playing time and being a mainstay for about 5 or 6 years there. Um, was able to have a brief stint with the Florida launch. If people know about that, it's old news now, but um, yeah, I really I feel that my athletic career primed my mindset for what I'm doing now. And also I was so naive in so many ways, and I was looking for affirmations from others. I didn't realize how much I was relying on that as sort of like a motivator. But it's such a blessing now to be able to look back and understand myself more deeply and um, move more towards intrinsic motivation, right, on a daily basis.
Mm. That's super interesting. I want to dive more to that, but before we do, um, can you talk about what you were working on athletically in that high school to college transition, and then in that college to MLL transition? What specific skills and traits were you really focusing on in those two different times?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I would say from high school to college, without a doubt, it was physical. Like I said, was pretty scrawny. I realized I was about to try to go walk onto a Division I team, and so I did some bench press and bicep curls and drank whole milk that summer and put on a couple pounds. But it was purely like, okay, I need to get bigger to kind of protect myself, and I thought that's what I needed to really perform well, which I think is in part true. Um, and from college to professional, it was more the nuanced, deceptive techniques, really, really nuanced skill development, like, and it's wild actually coaching youth now because a lot of these kids have these skills that I didn't have till I played pro. Um, but playing box lacrosse was a really big game changer for me. Learning about, twisters and really the fundamental aspect of behind the backs. It's not just an advanced technique, right? Something that's really helpful fundamentally. And being less symmetrical, right? This concept in lacrosse of Americans are told you got to have a weak hand, you got to be able to go both ways. And I think it's good advice in some ways, but it's also naive in many ways because the best players in the world, many of the best players in the world, are not symmetrical. They can make a play in any scenario with their strong hand, and I started to understand how that can be beneficial. Um, but as I got into the pros, I was basically strictly a defensive midfielder. Coming from my college career, I played mostly offense, and sometimes they would let me drop back on D because I could do it, but they wanted me more fresh for offense. Whereas just to crack the roster, I was like, I'll do anything. You know what I mean? Like I'll learn whatever. And so defensive midfield was my ticket. And as my skills started to really develop, I was able to get more two-way midi reps, even some man up reps, some offense midi type reps. But um, yeah, it was really focused on the nuance skill development, and I was able to see it from other players. And what I was doing at that time was giving individual lessons and small group lessons. So on a week to week basis, I'd be going and playing with the best players in the world. And then I'd go and teach it to K through 12 boys and girls, which just really, really helped me to embody and understand those skills on a deeper level. So I think teaching the skills while learning them was key for my development. Um, but when people ask me about like the biggest jump from college to pro, as far as like what I'm seeing, I know it wasn't the exact question, but I think it's relevant, is like you don't necessarily see um, way higher athleticism or way higher skill even, but you see decisions being made much faster. The understanding of the game is better, and so things do happen faster, but it's not because players are faster and more skilled, it's just that there's a deeper understanding, and so, um, you see these transitions and these plays happen at a faster rate, and so that was tough for me to catch up to. I didn't get, throughout my career, the highest level of coaching because of where I grew up. I didn't get amazing, amazing coaching really until college and pro. And I had a great high school coach, don't get me wrong. It was just it was such a small pond. And so to learn about the schematics of the game and the X's and O's is still a process for me. I coach at the college level as well. One of my contracts is with St. Michael's College. I'm the mental skills coach there. And I've just learned so much from the head coach, Alex Smith, and right now the assistant coach, Dan Johnson. It's incredible how much, if I just stay open, I'm like, wow, A, I wish I knew this sooner, but B, this is so great to know now. And um, yeah, just staying a student. It's kind of my story, is like always open to work on whatever, um, not necessarily whatever I'm told, but in a sense, whatever. I mean, if I trust you, I will work on something you tell me to work on. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really, really fantastic. I love the way you highlight teaching and coaching as
Yeah.
a reinforcer of skill development.
Yep. And it also has primed the philosophy that I try to teach to other coaches now. A lot of coaches are in the mentality that I need a new drill for my for my fifth and sixth graders. And then when they get to seventh and eighth grade, what's the new drill? And then when they get to high school, what's the new drill? And there's no real new drills. And that's what it helped me to understand that just from a skill standpoint, throwing a pass for a fifth grade girl is no different than for a 12th grade boy. In some ways, of course, the stick has some subtleties, but they're not as vast as people might assume. And the real differences has to do with, can you do it at full speed under pressure? The drills don't change necessarily. It's just the intensity, the speed, and then the level of pressure that can be placed on you. Can you still perform that fundamental skill?
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. So how did the coaching journey begin? As
Yeah.
you alluded to it a little bit there. So you graduate from Hartford, you're starting out with the Cannons. What was life like then, and where did coaching enter?
Yeah. Like just a quote from my mom just popped in my head. She said, "Don't be afraid to invest in yourself." I got an engineering degree, and I was studying for the PE, the professional engineering exam, and just kind of confused, didn't really know what I want to do. And she said, "Hey, like, hit up your trainer." I worked with a trainer, Joe Drain, who's a great friend, like best friend to this day. Um, and he had helped me prepare for my junior year of college. And so after college, I reached back out to him, and he was opening up his own gym. And so I not only wanted to train with him, but I quickly actually started working for him as well. So the very start of my paid coaching career was coaching camps for like Sean Morris or the Cannons, just basic summer camps, and then actually strength and conditioning coaching, working for Joe Drain of Compete Strength and Conditioning. And I actually think that stemmed from my junior and senior year while still in college. I just kind of took a leadership role in the weight room with my team. So there were many times when the strength coach would lean on me to get the guys going or start the warm-ups or whatever. So I felt like I already had some experience in that environment. So between strength and conditioning coaching, coaching camps, and it was actually Joe again who encouraged me and actually physically helped me start my first business, which was camps and clinics. It's all been done before, but It was my ticket to take playing professionally more serious and really delegate 3 to 4 hours per day to be a professional athlete, so that I could make my own schedule and coach individual lessons and players. A lot of times at fields or their houses, driving around the state just to keep that lifestyle going. Right. So it was a bit hectic. I was eating in my car a lot. I'm glad that I'm out of that phase, but I think it was necessary for me to kind of just get my hands dirty in the initial process of becoming an entrepreneur. And like you, again, kind of emphasize that I brought up, this concept of learning it and teaching it simultaneously. That was really like, wow, like there's something here. I didn't know how to articulate it at the time, but that process was really starting.
That's awesome. So it sounds like you really, your goal was to play at the highest level
Yeah,
and kind of build your life around that as
100%.
the focus point.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there was like, it's who I truly was, but I was also driven by my ego more than I had um, acknowledged at the time. Like I had a growth mindset in so many ways, and I'm sure many people listening know what that means. But I also had a fixed mindset in so many ways that I hadn't acknowledged yet. I was craving for people to tell me how good at lacrosse I was or how athletic I was. Like I didn't know how much that was driving me at the time. Um, I don't think I would change anything if I were to go back other than shifting those motivations to be more intrinsic.
Mm. How has that changed? How has that
Well,
shifted?
yeah, there's a lot there. I think in its simplest form, I I truly and in my heart care less what people think of my capabilities. And I still have that care for what other people think, but it's more about can I can I add value to them? Am I brightening their day even, right? Am I bringing some joy to them? Um, and it becomes more about it's still about what I'm offering as opposed to, can you offer me some validation? I didn't realize how much I wanted that. And that's almost, I think that's about zero now. I don't really crave it at all. And actually, sometimes when people give it to me, I get like a little cringe. And I'm actually, that's something I'm working on. It's like just accepting a compliment without letting it, um, shape my framework and how I'm thinking about myself and others. So yeah, it was not easy, and it was definitely not sudden. It was a long, slow process, and I think there was luckily always a part of me that didn't really care what other people thought. There was just this large part of me that did that I hadn't confronted yet.
Yeah, it's interesting. We all have these, you know, in the yoga framework, they're called kleshas. They're obstacles. Um, Ego is one of them, and we all have them, right? Like ignorance, attachment, aversion, ego, and fear. Like we all have these, but it's interesting to hear you kind of describe how that like shift happened over time. And
Yeah.
what do you think contributed to that? Like, were you doing anything intentionally to, were you doing any self work or any kinds of um, self study that helps kind of bring you in that direction?
Yeah, there's a few, definitely, like, very clear pivot moments. One was in 2019, that was my last year playing professionally, and I had a few concussions within a short span, and so hadn't recovered from the last one, got another one. It was like it was bad for a little bit there where, yeah, just, like, brutal headaches, couldn't look at screens. My day-to-day operations were, like, really struggling. And so I made the decision to just cold turkey stop playing lacrosse. I can't put myself in these situations anymore, at least temporarily. And I traveled to the West Coast to work with a company called String King. I did a video with them, and I was reading a book, Oxygen Advantage by Patrick McCallum. And this was really the intro to everything I do now, to be honest with you. This was like the most important pivot point for me because that's actually the techniques that I teach to this day is grounded in that framework, Oxygen Advantage, which is really grounded in Buteyko. Um, it's just a little bit more, you can push yourself a little more, right? There's that athletic focus. So reading that book felt like the pivot point because as I was practicing it, and actually I was listening to it. It was an audiobook. I was listening to it. And so as I was listening to it, I was walking and I was on the plane and just being present and allowing myself to practice what they were talking about in real time. So I was basically closing my mouth, activating my diaphragm, breathing slower, practicing pauses after exhales. Simple, simple things that I had never even thought about. And in real time, I was getting real relief. My headache would go away. My anxiety, like I had symptoms of my concussions were depression and anxiety, which I had never experienced in my life. Lucky me, I really had a great upbringing. I wasn't an anxious person, but I started to become that, and I was like, it was a struggle. And so I was getting relief both physically and emotionally from these very simple breathing techniques. And so that felt like the start of it where I was like, wow, like I have more influence over how I feel than I realized. And wow, breathing is this connector to every system in our body. And we can just choose to breathe differently if we decide to at any moment. And so that's the big one. That's the really big one. The second big one that comes to mind is when I started training with Master Pritchett of Sandao Jiu-Jitsu Do. So I'm 4 years into that now, started in 2020, and it very much so feels like a traditional martial art in that it teaches how to use it, why we shouldn't really use it. And, like the more dangerous I've become, the more peaceful I've become type of thing where I don't want to use these tech. I don't want to hurt anybody. I don't want to get hurt, of course. Right. And so that's the only time that I would use it is if myself or my family was in danger. Right. Um, and in the process of showing up to class weekly, it really kind of feels like there's a religious component. There's a spiritual component. He speaks of meditation, and the third pivot point is really what he guided me towards, which is, a meditation practice, that is, um, it's called knowledge, and it's Prem Rawat. He's this Indian man, and he basically has been preaching about peace since he was, like, 9 years old. He had, like, crowds of people. He's just one of these guys that's just had followers his whole life because he speaks so elegantly about life. And in that process of learning that meditation, we talked about this before we recorded. He basically discerns between belief and knowledge. And if you're not able to know, it's going to stay a belief. You need to understand that if you cannot translate a belief to knowledge, then you don't know. And so what do we know? Well, I'm breathing, I'm alive, right? If I close my eyes, there's light inside of me, right? There's music inside of me, the gratitude of breath, the nectar, the knowledge of, you know, experiencing all those things and how beautiful um the inner world is. And then these concepts of like everything that I'm looking for is inside of me, right? And so it felt like each of those kind of pivot points really helped me to end up getting to that place of like, stop looking outside, just look inward. Yeah, I think that kind of encapsulates it pretty well. But it's fun to articulate it, man, because really, those 3 pivot points are so, so near and dear to me, and I appreciate you kinda pulling those out just now, so thank you.
That's awesome. It's kind of like challenge, concussion,
Yeah,
right? Enter breath work, enter martial arts, enter this higher level meditation practice. And it sounds like everything I'm looking for is inside of me. Like, I love that truth.
right,
Um, I I try to go there with clients often. It's like you don't need the app to do the meditation. You you don't need the YouTube yoga video. You can you can have
yeah,
that higher level experience in your own body.
right. Yeah, no, that's interesting you bring that up because I talk to my wife a lot about this, and I've talked to many clients about this as well. Um, it seems like, and I definitely feel this sometimes, um, without using the app or without, just doing it on our own, there's like a fear that we might not like what we see or
Mhm.
experience. It's like, well, I don't know if that's going to be good or not, and it's very interesting because, maybe this is a belief, but like it can't be. I don't believe it can be bad because you're alive. And it's like if you start at the ground and work your way up, um, you can't mess this up.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, the yoga sutras talks about this idea of these negative thoughts, just being thoughts, and over time they dissipate.
Mhm.
If we try to hide them, they come back with more ferocity.
Right. Yeah. There's the resistance. What we resist will persist. Right. Yeah.
What we resist will persist. Yeah, yeah, that's really cool. How did you find the Sandao Jiu-Jitsu school?
Well, luckily, my very best friend, his name's Kenny Francis. He was the best man at my wedding. We were roommates, freshman basketball camp. We go way back. Um, he's a black belt. He's been a black belt for a couple years now. And even when I was first couple years playing professional, he was obsessed with it. So he was already getting into it, and I naively thought, I know how to train. I'm doing strength and conditioning. I'm playing pro. I'm the man. Like I don't need that. And that was naive. That was naive of me. And so it came to me in that form of my friend really just pushing me, being like, dude, like you got to come train. Like this is going to be good for you. And so it really wasn't until I stopped playing that I opened up that opportunity. And I was like, you know what? Whatever. Yeah, let's train. And now I know I'm like, God, I should have done it sooner. You know what I mean? Like I should have been doing this the whole time. I would have been a better player. I am a better player now because of it. I'm a better coach because of it. I'm a better human. I have more joy throughout my days, and I feel physically, I feel safer. Like there's so many benefits to it. Um, and yeah, I feel very lucky. I know there's a lot of Brazilian jiu-jitsu out there now. It's not necessarily what this is. Sandao jiu-jitsu. Sandao stands for free striking. So it's a free striking form of jiu-jitsu. And what Master Pritchett did is he took 10, actually 11, including his military background, different arts, and pulled all the best pieces from his experience to create this eclectic, holistic art that um, ideally, if used correctly, you could shift into different styles based on who your opponent is, type of thing. Right? You got a guy who knows wrestling, you got a guy who knows Brazilian jiu-jitsu, you can move more towards our kung fu and karate and others, more striking arts, right? A guy going against a karate guy, there's other things we can do against that. So it's like very interesting how we took this big picture approach and tried to boil it down. And I'm super grateful, man, because that's how I think already. I already would have, if I went to Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, I probably would have gone to a karate as well and a kung fu as well. But luckily, I found an art that has kind of combined all those things.
Yeah, that's cool. That is very cool. And it's really awesome that Master Push is also emphasizing meditation and the importance of the mental game.
Yeah, I
What
mean,
can
he
you
was,
say about that? Like, how does that look in training?
yeah, and just for more context too, like he was on the Olympic wrestling team at one point. He has won multiple gold medals all around the world at Sancho and some other, competitions. And so he is a champion, right? He is someone who has lived how to win in the highest levels. So right off the bat, he garners respect, and you're like, wow, I should probably listen to this guy. Um, in many ways, it looks like the simplest forms of advice. It's like, hey, you need like I can tell you're stressed out. You're not meditating enough. Like he'll know. He can just tell. And he'll tell stories of times when other meditation masters picked up on his meditativeness and approached him and could tell that he had been meditating. And so it's like, listen, these things don't happen unless you meditate. So he just encourages it in like a storytelling form. Um, but practical, advice, things like don't drink, don't do drugs, right? Like, eat good food, right? You need to have good thoughts. If you have poor thoughts, accept them and move on, but also continue to feed the good wolves, right? Like, you get good at what you practice. And if you don't realize it, it's very easy for us as humans to practice negativity. It's actually more natural for us. We are, by default, negatively biased. We think it's going to keep us safe, right? But what the key components to being present and then hopefully being intelligent is like updating our software, right? Like when people have random acts of kindness, when people really help us out, don't think that they did it for some ulterior motive. Like accept it for what it was. It was an act of kindness. It was something that they just wanted to do. And so, wow, like people really are great, and you start to see that more in your everyday life when you open up to it, right? And then we continue to update the update, and um, most people are up to pretty great things. It's just that the negativity is so much louder, and it goes viral. We're very much aware of that, like that. The things that we see most often um, are negative because they are more confrontational and they get more comments and likes. And so, um, yeah, we must, if we want to maintain a positive mindset, we must go up against our own negativity bias because we all have it. It's innate.
Well put. Well
Thanks.
put.
Thanks.
Yeah, this might be a good time to bring in our. This is actually the first time we've done this on the show, but I had Martin fill out a yoga therapy assessment form before we did our talk today, and that assessment that I shared with you, Martin, was called the Koshas, layers of existence. In yoga theory, the koshas are the physical body, the breath or energy, organ systems, then the emotions and mind, the always moving mind, which we all have. Then the intellect or higher mind, and then the spirit would be that higher level or center that it just is who we are. So I'm curious, Martin, what insights did you pick up on filling out that form, and um, what what learning can you share from that experience?
Let me actually pull it up really quick because I'd like to look at it. There was a few things that stuck out to me. Um, so at first I felt great, I'm like, oh, like I exercise regularly, there's some of the like the body questions. I'm like, yeah, yeah, like I'm locked in. Um, and as I went down, I there's just clear vulnerabilities that I'm like, oh wow, like, this is helpful for me to think about because I'm not exactly how I want to be energetically every single day. So the very first question that I was like, oh, like this is interesting was my energy levels are steady and regular. This is something that I struggle with. There are days when I have really poor energy, and it's not just because I had a hard workout the other day and I didn't get enough sleep. I think there's other things going on that I allow negative thought loops and shame cycles and yeah, like anger to sit too long or whatever that really affect my energy levels. So that was an interesting one to just see that question and be like, all right, I gotta answer this honestly. Um, the other one, I hold or shorten my breath without noticing. Um, I, in many senses, take pride in my breathing, right? I teach it
Yeah.
to athletes. I teach it to adults. I have clients that have had traumatic brain injuries that come and work with me, and so I feel a sense of duty, to practice what I preach. And so when I do catch myself breathing short and shallow, um, I correct it, but it happens all of the time. It totally happens all the time. So that was one that stuck out to me. Um, I need to spend more time in nature. That was a good reminder. Like it happens, but I need to be a lot more intentional about it. Um, this one was interesting. So this is under the mind category. I experience eye strain, ringing in ears, or other sensory afflictions. Um, I definitely, I'll tense my eyes without realizing it, but the ringing of the ears is actually something that I hadn't articulated or thought about, but it happens often for me. So I don't know if you have any insight to that. Um, I have to see it to believe it. Yeah, I put no. And we talked about this a little bit too, where it's like I've changed my relationship around the word belief. You know, um, like I said, I either know or I don't know. So, um, some of the things that have happened, even in the last couple of months, I've had some really interesting experiences that I cannot explain, um, that feel real. And in my heart, I know is, an angel coming down on me type of thing. But at the same time, I don't really know, I don't really know. And um, I couldn't really see it, but I still feel like I believe it, so I don't feel like I have to see something to believe it. Um, yep. I would say the last one, and yeah, like we talked about briefly just now too, is like, I have strong, unwavering beliefs. I put, rarely or not so often because Um, yeah, I'm shifting away from relying on belief as my framework to see the world around me. My perception has simplified in that I either know or I do not know. And if I have a belief, could I know? Is there a way to find out for sure? And that's been a helpful way to think about things. And if I can't know, then I don't, and that's okay. And there's no shame in that.
If you would have answered that question, let's say a decade ago,
Yeah.
how would that possibly have
I would have
felt?
answered it very differently. Yeah, I would have said, I have strong, unwavering beliefs. I would have said habitually. I would have said, yeah, very often, right? Especially when I was playing professionally, it felt like this concept of believe in yourselves was so important, um, and it got me out of bed into the gym. It got me to my skill session. So it served an amazing function in my life. But like I've also mentioned, I think it left me a little bit blind and vulnerable to um, how some of those beliefs were egotistic and craved outside validation that actually hindered my growth in many other ways.
Super interesting. Yeah, I appreciate you um, being open to sharing all that, and
Yeah.
taking the time. I mean, um, that's an assessment that I generally do with every new client before the first session, and then we'll retest, say 5 sessions in, to see what and they're micro changes, right? They happen slowly, and they don't all happen at once. It's like one shift happens, and that catalyzes something else.
Mm.
But um, I think one of the coolest things about these is that it invites this self-reflective sense of um, both agency and understanding, and cultivating deeper awareness with kind of this objective, where am I kind of lens.
Right.
So that
Right.
was really cool. And it makes total sense. I mean, with your athletic foundation, building upon that, you're layering in martial arts practice, breath work, meditation. Haven't even gotten to fatherhood yet, but layer in that, that new level of perspective and duty. I would imagine, like, it's reshaping all those layers,
Right.
physically, mentally, spiritually.
Right. I think it's also helpful to note, and you already alluded to this, that who we truly are really isn't those things. And so there's right this the spirit essence of who we really are. Like that's who I am. And so if I have these habits of thinking in certain ways or behaving in certain ways that I feel shame around, um, which I, like everyone else, certainly struggle with that and have in the past, it's okay because I am who I am, and that is enough. That is who I am. And the more I've meditated, the more I get to connect with that, and the easier it is to fill something like this out and see it as a helpful tool as opposed to an attack, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well put. Tell us about becoming a dad. How's
Oh, I
that
love to.
experience been?
It's the best. I've been so grateful, man. When I first found out, I was not so grateful. I was shitting my pants. Excuse me. Um, I was actually on a road trip, and I knew my wife was going to go and get an ultrasound, and I was like, okay, 0 or 1, 0 or 1, like please be 0. We had no idea. We had no idea, and so she was already 12 weeks pregnant with twins. So, my jaw dropped, my whole world flipped upside down, and to be quite honest with you, I had been feeling something in my gut, and I could not explain it, and when I found out that information, I was like, "That's what that is." Like, biologically, I am a different person, I can feel it. I know, I know, and, yeah, just that sense of duty and, like, the preparation process, was really intense. I've never experienced anything like this, just this innate sense of like, there's things I gotta think about that I've never thought about before. And, how do I plan for this? And just all these thoughts that come with that. But my wife is a champion. She did so well during pregnancy and the whole process that's got us to this point, which is now they're 2 years old. They just turned two. And so what a progression from 0 to 2, and, it's gonna keep going, of course, but it feels like, the hardest part was, like, the first 4 to 8 weeks. I call those the dark days, don't really remember that much of it, just survival mode a little bit right there. But yeah, I love talking about this because especially with, some of my friends and colleagues, maybe that are or are not parents yet, sometimes they can get confused by some of these truths that I found out. Um, but in one sense, I truly have felt the medicine of parenting my own inner child in real time. And so it feels like what has happened in many circumstances is there's a need by one of the boys, and so they're distraught, they're crying, and they need something. And sometimes in real time, but oftentimes in hindsight, I realize there's the part of me that's triggered by that, or is struggling to you know stay calm and composed in that situation. That part of me is a child that age that maybe didn't get what they needed. And so as I soothe my child with my calm and confident energy, I can actually simultaneously soothe my inner child that's that age. And this healing process that comes along with that has been the most profound thing of my entire life. There's no question. Um, Yeah, it's great, man. And I don't there's so many cliches out there with parenting and like, oh, like it's not about you anymore. And I don't really agree with that. Because all of our experiences are internal. We might feel like the way that that child is behaving is making me feel like this. It's like, no, it's not. No, it's not. You're choosing. I'm making a choice to appreciate this or to be disrupted by this, right? Whether it's bad or good. Um, and that experience is within me because I'm a human being and that's how this goes. And I want to yeah, just encourage any other parents out there that maybe are struggling or maybe their kids behaving in ways that they don't like. And I just would encourage them to focus on being who you needed and actually providing what you needed. And you might find that in the process of calming yourself, um, your child will absorb that ripple effect in a way that is ideal, and what you resist will persist, right? If you try to stop the crying because you don't like it, oftentimes we extend the crying, without realizing it. Yeah, I love it, man. I'm so grateful to be a father. So grateful.
Think you're on the verge of a parenting book there.
Yes. Thank you. I'm actually reading, I don't know if you know Dr. Becky, this
Oh
Good
yeah.
Inside.
Side.
She is incredible, man. I've been watching her videos for a while and I got the book and yeah, I'm grateful for her. That's for sure. Becky, what's her last name? Becky Kennedy.
Kennedy. Awesome. Yeah, it's like we can repeat history in a negative way, or we can reshape it in a positive way.
Yeah. And
And I love the way you had like, yeah,
unconsciously we will repeat the negative,
right,
which is why it feels like there's such a duty.
right.
Because if we don't think about it, it will lean towards that negative bias without us realizing it.
You know, how do you think about this will be probably our last topic, the idea of flow state. What does that mean to you, and how do you relate to it?
In the zone, I put it at the top of my mission. It is everything that I am going for in two main senses. One is for myself. I'd like idealistically my life to be one giant flow state session. I'd like to be at my desk all of the time. I know that that's unrealistic. But that's part of, I guess, my goal or my mission is to understand myself well enough and master myself well enough that I am able to stay present and stay sharp and stay um, energetically, excited and like passionate about what's going on in my life. And I think it's totally feasible. It's just something that I'm working towards. But in the second sense, which is more practical, I help myself and athletes understand that um, to play your best, to be your best, is to be in flow state. So just by starting with that acknowledgement, we can start to work backwards and engineer. Well, what should our days look like? In the case of working with a lacrosse player or team, what could our days look like so that on game day we are our very best? A team playing their best is that group flow, right? Um, and again, there's many cliches that come along with this, but it's absolutely true. Removing any attachment to the result, right? If you're trying to score, you're actually reducing the likelihood that you're going to score, right? Um, and understanding, well, what do we have control over? What do we not have control over? Well, I could take a shot. Is that a good shot for me? Great. If I can take 5 good shots per game, I'll probably score 2.5 on average, or 1 to 2. If my goal is to score X amount of points per game, when I step on that field, I have to work backwards from a results based goal to a behavior based goal. That is going to allow me to more likely slip into that ground level that is flow state. And so if I'm in my thought process thinking, I want to score, I can reframe that. Let me see if I can get a good shot. And if I can get a good shot, well, I've freaking practiced how to get my good shot so many times that by the time the ball comes in my stick, I don't think about it. And all of a sudden the ball's in the net. Well, guess what? You just entered flow state.
Yep.
Right? So allowing players to acknowledge when flow state moments happen, because recalling them has actually been proven to help increase the likelihood they happen again, right? Um, but this paradox that like if I try to get to flow, I actually move further from it. And so that it feels like at the core of my work with coaching is entering a flow state. And then I'll also say an example for like in the breathing realm. I think a lot of people, could be taken back, like, "Oh, you're gonna tell me I'm breathing wrong?" Like, there's that initial, like, "Oh, I have to work on my breathing too?" Like, ugh, right? But once we accept that, like, man, like, if we just don't think about it, there's probably, dysfunctional breathing patterns that are happening, right? Um, and also that, like, our past traumas can affect it, and there's so much there, right? But what I tried to say, "Hey, yes, we're gonna focus on this, but what we want to work towards, if you're okay with this, is not having to think about it at all. Is getting to a point where our CO2 tolerance is at a place and our daily gratitude and check-ins throughout the day are at a place where we don't have to think about it anymore. That we're naturally doing roughly 6 to 8 breaths per minute through our nose and using our diaphragm well. And you don't even have to think about it. Now sometimes I catch myself breathing well and it's like, let's fucking go. Like I didn't have to even think about it. It's just happening now. And that's a product of focusing on it so much for a period of time that now I don't have to as much. And so I think that's also relative to flow state because when you're in flow, thoughts go away. There's nothing to do. There is no effort. You're not trying. You're just doing. You're being who you really are.
Well put. Well put. It's like you're cultivating the conditions for flow to occur.
Right. Let me do my best to put myself in that environment.
Yeah. Yeah. Through training, lifestyle, focus.
Sure. Yep. Planting thoughts on purpose. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
What are some of the biggest challenges that you see in, let's say, some of the athletes you work with at the high school and college level?
I would say self-doubt, over performance anxiety, maybe those two things are the same. Um, this doesn't go away after middle school. I think it appears in middle school in such a strong way, but it doesn't go away, which is this, we know that like our friends are over there watching and like, I don't want to look stupid in front of them. Like that, you know, is the biggest thing. And I think luckily for me, like I mentioned earlier, that was one of the things I still like I didn't care too much about. And I think that helped me in a lot of ways. I've always been a goofy person. People describe me as like a weird guy. Like I'll do silly things and say silly things. to get a laugh, or that's always kind of been a thing for me. And, and I think many people struggle with that. So for the athletes that high school, college, and even in professional, there's a consistent through line of the challenge that is, I guess I'll use the word trying, but basically, going as hard as you can without that fear of failure is a skill, and it is incredibly hard to master. I don't even feel like I've mastered it, but I've come a long way, so that it doesn't affect me so much as it used to. I'd say that's the number one thing I notice. It had nothing to do with athleticism or skill. It's all what's going on inside your head.
I can't think of a better sentence to end on right than that right there. Well put. Well put. Where can folks find out more about you and your work? I just want to plug Martin has an awesome Instagram with lots of practical breath work exercises and activities that folks should really check out. So, where can folks find you?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram as Martin J. Bowes, Bowes. And my website is martinbowes.com. I'm looking to grow the business of speaking, and coaching about breathing. Now, I've really been lacrosse focused in a majority of my career. And as I've grown, I've seen these, opportunities to work with teams, businesses, individuals, around mindsets and breathing. And so it doesn't matter what sport you play, or even if you don't play sports, I feel like I can add some value. So, martinbowes.com would be where I'm trying to grow that business. Um, and yeah, I'm around, if people, want to ask questions, I'm very open to DM conversations. And, I love seeing where people are at. So if people are interested in the things that I'm talking about and, want to chat more, I'm here.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. This has been a great conversation. I sincerely learned a lot talking to you, and I hope that this ripples out to folks and they can learn a lot too.
Thank you so much, Dan. I really appreciate it. I'll just throw one last thing in there too. This is helpful for self-talk and, of course, in our relationships with others, which is doing our best to catch ourselves being judgmental and to shift that judgment into curiosity. And the complexity of life is something to get excited about. I think sometimes we can oversimplify things. Well, this is good and that is bad, and it's like, well, it's not quite that simple. And so the more we become curious about these overlapping, ideas and concepts, and even parts of ourselves, um, the more that we open up to these blessings that are just waiting for us. And so, yeah, curiosity over judgment.
Yeah. Question the opposite of the negative thought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And making space for it, just being like, you know what? I'm not going to let you go. I'm going to let you stay. And
Yeah.
what's profound, right? This paradox, what's profound, if you let a negative thought stay, guess what? It doesn't really want to be there. So if
Right.
you let it stay and you're like, hey, you know what? I'll make space for you. It starts to change. It
Yeah.
starts to shift for us.
Awesome. Great
Thank you.
stuff, man. Thank you.
Yeah,
Really.
appreciate any listeners out there, and thank you, Dan. Thank you, Kyle, for listening to us. And I'm excited we're just getting started, man. I'm excited to grow our relationship. So
Likewise. Likewise. This is great.
good stuff, man.
I hope this show helps us all access our highest potential. You can learn more about my work as a yoga therapist at flowstateyogatherapy.com or on social media at flowstateyogatherapy. You can also email me at flowstateyogatherapy@gmail.com. I look forward to connecting with you all. I hope you find an interesting nugget in this episode. I hope you share this with a friend, and I hope you reach out to me with feedback. It is valuable. Thank you again, and enjoy the journey.